If you want to understand America in 2025, don't watch cable news. Instead, listen to what legislative bills people have actually clicked on. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, the podcast where we look past the headlines and into the actual text of the laws shaping our lives. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephen, here to confirm that yes, people absolutely spent 2025 reading bills about sperm and window tinting. Now, I should just clarify that is two separate bills, one about sperm, one about window tinting. It wasn't a bill about sperm and window tinting because that would be weird. Well, I mean, even weirder, the bills were anyway.
You know, I think it would have been very 2025 coded. But so today we're breaking down what bills people actually read on Bill Track 50 in 2025. Not what passed, not what the pundits yelled about, but maybe that also had an influence there. But what grabbed people's attention around the country. And then we're going to look ahead and see what those patterns could tell us about what to expect this year in 2026. And spoiler alert, there's no real correlation between what was interesting to people and what passed, just so you know. So before we take a turn and dive into some state bills and some other interesting federal topics, let's set the scene. 2025 was a lot.
It was a lot, and that a lot is doing heroic work there. Trump's second term opened with that flood of executive action, expanding immigration enforcement under the Lake and Riley Act, then mass pardons for January 6 defendants, sweeping federal layoffs driven by the new Department of Government Efficiency. Anyone remember Doge? What happened to that? And billions in frozen grants to universities and aid organizations. Let's not forget cancelling USAID, which potentially resulted in the deaths of thousands of people across the world. Layer on catastrophic wildfires, aviation disasters, a presidential state funeral, and then later in the year, a blue wave backlash in off-year elections. And you get a year that basically felt constantly off balance and in chaos.
I can confirm I have not felt balanced one time this year.
That's right. I think pretty much everyone in the country had the twisties.
Oh, yes. In the middle of all of this national chaos and all of these things changing every single week, it was honestly impossible to keep up. People went looking at a lot of state legislation. States were doing a lot and people were reading about that. So let's start with the biggest theme of last year by far. Money.
Oh, yes, it always comes down to the money, doesn't it? So the most read bills of 2025 were overwhelmingly about quite prosaic topics such as public sector pay, benefits, and working conditions. The stuff that, might not make the headlines, but it shows up directly in people's lives. So, for example, you've got Texas, HB 237 and SB 572. They're the really clearest examples here, both relatively dull bills that propose meaningful salary increases for state employees. And HB 237 actually became the single most read bill of the entire year.
Wow, that is really striking because HB 237 wasn't a sweeping reform or anything that seemed that crazy.
No, it was really narrow, but it answered the most powerful question in politics: what happens to my paycheck, right? So
Yeah.
tens of thousands of Texans could look at that bill and see a direct line to their income. Despite the interest, though, neither bill went anywhere. Both bills dying quietly in committee without even a debate, which is
Wow.
obviously not to be said about the debate that was happening outside the
Yeah.
legislature. Then you've got another one. North Carolina, H934, followed much the same formula. It was about restructuring compensation for state employees. You've got Oklahoma, SB 201, HB 2251. They both rework teacher salary schedules. Again, quite technical bills that only affect relatively small number of people, but with immediate consequences for those very real people. And they were all ignored by lawmakers, didn't go anywhere despite the interest on Bill Track 50.
Yes, the interest in Bill Track 50, and I guess by the public of the people that these constituents are
Absolutely.
supposedly representing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then we kind of get into a pretty surprisingly spicy topic of this year with telework. What can you tell me about that?
Yes, well, Texas really went for telework in 2025. You've got HB 5196, SB 2615, both bills updating rules around remote work for public employees. again might strike some people as a little bit dull, really. But actually, they created a comprehensive framework for remote working. They required formal permission. They clarified rights and responsibilities. So it's really sort of setting telework on a proper sort of legislative basis, really. And they really hit this post-pandemic nerve: who gets from work from home, how often, and under what conditions. So these bills weren't culture war fodder. They weren't attracting a lot of controversy. They were practical tools that shaped daily life, and readers treated them that way. And the House bill actually was enacted as well. So in this case, the interests and the actions of the politicians actually aligned.
Well, that is one win for the year. I will mark that in the win column. Okay, so now that we've kind of got the practicality of 2025 out of the way, I think it's time for us to shift into the theatrical response that this year was. Like we said, it has not felt like at a single point in time that you could expect what's coming next. I mean, literally just a couple weeks ago, Trump added these little explainers underneath all the presidential portraits in the White House, and I did not have that on my 2025 bingo card. So, in the spirit of theatrics, let's look at some very different kind of bills.
Yes. So legislative trolling certainly had a banner year in 2025. A lot of these bills we've already spoken about on various other podcasts, generally going, oh my God, what is this? So you have Mississippi SB 2319, the Contraception Begins at Erection Act, the prime example. On its face, it proposed criminal penalties for wasting sperm, but the sponsors made it clear this was a satirical protest legislation aimed at restrictive abortion laws. Why should women be treated differently from men? That type of thing.
When I read this, I literally had a very good chuckle, and I was like, we are in the end of times. It was very funny. But also my favorite part about this, which is also very 2025 coded, is the internet absolutely understood the assignment, and the amount of chuckling I got from this bill was probably akin to the amount that people read it.
Absolutely. I think people just liked the light relief in the face of all the other sort of much more serious things that were going on. And it did, in fact, become our second most read bill of the year. So congratulations to that bill. Minnesota's SF 2589 followed a similar playbook, albeit from the other end of the political spectrum. This was a real bill drafted in formal legislative language that attempted to classify Trump derangement syndrome as a mental illness for regulatory purposes. Clearly designed to provoke, not pass, and it worked. And it didn't pass.
Oh, yes, TDS. Trump was literally just tweeting, or truthing, if you will, about that the other week. It really seems that it has done its job well. That bill also understood its assignment. And Trump's truth about Rob Rayner was doing the same job as the bill, of course, seeking to provoke controversy, anger, and possibly distract from something that was coming out that Friday, the Epstein files.
Maybe. Who knows?
All right, let's change our focus to Missouri, who decided that subtlety was absolutely overrated.
Oh, yes, that they did. People may remember HB 1484, which proposed creating illegal alien certified bounty hunters empowered to locate and report undocumented immigrants. It read like dystopian science fiction. I really thought it was like 1984, the sequel. But it was real enough to actually be introduced and widely shared and followed. Again, though, didn't really have any legs in the legislature.
Yes, I remember this bill, and I remember being absolutely horrified and gobsmacked by it. And I think this was where we started talking about another really common theme throughout the year, which was this Overton window shift. And that Overton window, again, is kind of, if you look at a very specific point in time, what is considered appropriate and culturally kind of acceptable. And seeing these really intense, off-the-charts crazy bills being proposed, being kind of in the zeitgeist, does end up having these impacts of shifting the Overton window. This is not a new thing to 2025 by any means, but it's definitely something that we talked about a lot this year.
Absolutely. So You've then got, of course, Texas. What reprise of the year would be complete without Texas? So Texas had SB 10, requiring the Ten Commandments to be displayed in public school classrooms. Now, very, very controversial. Lots of opposition to this one, lots of support as well, of course. And it was a serious bill, and it passed as well. So that is now the law in Texas.
Okay.
The Ten Commandments must be displayed in public school classrooms. And then you've got Colorado's SB 3, which restricted the sale and transfer of semi-automatic firearms. Again, pretty controversial in some sectors, and that one was also enacted.
Okay.
So very different goals, different politics, but the same reason for attention. These bills really hit America's cultural nerve endings.
Yeah, so these were bills that weren't necessarily stunts, and they did get moving forward. And then we also saw some pretty large spikes in readership from bills that were not flashy at all. They just found the right audience.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You don't need broad readership if you can get a dedicated sort of single issue community actually following a bill. So people were sometimes very engaged about quite seemingly random things. So let's take as an example Illinois' HB 2827, the Homeschool Act, capital letters. It's the perfect example. At its core, it proposed statewide homeschooling reporting requirements and portfolio evaluation. So nothing dramatic, but homeschooling networks treated it as a major warning sign, circulated it nationally, and turned the Bill Track 50 page into a tracking hub. And it was widely debated and amended back in April, but to date, it hasn't made it out of the House. But should note that, of course, Illinois is a biennial state, so could still be picked up and progress next year.
All right, well, I will stay tuned for that one. We also had Missouri HB 2686, which did something similar for privacy advocates.
Yes, yes, that's right. It expanded the use of automated license plate readers to enforce insurance compliance. So very, very controversial topic this, about whether we should have cameras reading our license plates. Civil liberties groups really latched onto it as an example of an expanding surveillance infrastructure, as they say it. And it pushed it all the way to number 3 in our rankings, actually. Again, lawmakers weren't that interested, though, and it did quietly die.
Okay, that's interesting. I know we're having a little bit of a contention in Denver about some camera tracking software, so I definitely think that's an interesting thing to be on the lookout for next year. And then we had North Carolina's Senate Bill 43.
Yes, this is where those vehicle window tinting comes in. That's so extremely niche. Without the sperm, no punchlines here. It was just a simple bill about regulating how windows can be tinted in vehicles. But proves the point that when the right community finds a bill, even the most obscure policy can explode in readership. And the legislature clearly liked their windows untinted, as this one also didn't go anywhere.
Okay, yes. People do have incredibly strong opinions about the tintation of their windows. Okay. And then we also can't skip what is perhaps the most oddest entry of the entire legislature.
Yes. I thought you might mention this one. If you look at the list in our blog post on this, you'll see that one glaring bill really leaps out. It's an Indiana continuing resolution from 2016, renaming part of an interstate, and it actually became our 20th most read bill of 2025, and it failed as well back in 2016.
Why was this brought up? I genuinely have no idea. If you are somebody that is in Indiana and you know why this is important, please let us know. We are open ears and ready to listen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's the big question for me. Did the bills that people read the most actually become law? We're kind of seeing back and forth here for some of the ones that we highlighted, but what's the general vibe?
Yeah, so generally speaking, no. The satirical, symbolic, and highly ideological bills all stalled or died outright. Meanwhile, low drama, administrative measures, telework updates, technical fixes, veteran toll exemptions quietly crossed the finish line.
Okay, so attention and outcomes are seemingly not aligned?
Barely acquaintances. So bipartisan practical bills did better legislatively. Controversial bills did better online. 2 parallel universes.
I think that says a lot about our time right now. Okay. So I think this is probably the biggest takeaway is actually just how people are using bill tracking tools now.
These weren't casual readers. These were organized networks, workers, homeschoolers, advocates, using specific bills as rallying points for coordinated action. Legislation isn't just lawmaking anymore. It's infrastructure for activism.
Which, honestly, we do love to see. So, okay, it's now time for us to whip out our crystal balls and look at what we could be looking at this year, looking back at last year in 2025. This seems like the most politically engaged year I've existed in the US, and that's nice. But it also feels like 2026 might be the year where all these unresolved fights come back. So there's going to be deadlines hitting, budgets colliding, courts intervening, all these things that have kind of been brewing last year in 2025. Suddenly everyone is going to pretend they're shocked when they are going to boil over. And we're probably going to see some stuff, especially with the midterms.
Absolutely.
So let's start federally. Stephen, what is the first gravity well that Congress is absolutely not going to be able to dodge this year?
Well, I mean, I think quite clearly that's going to be healthcare affordability. Okay. Full stop, really. The enhanced ACA marketplace subsidies are the biggest ticking clock on Capitol Hill at the moment. If premiums spike, and all signs point that way at the moment, and there might be a last-minute reprieve, but it's looking unlikely, then Congress will get dragged back into the fight, whether it wants to or not.
Yes, and I think they don't want that. And lawmakers seem to be getting pretty nervous about this in general.
Exactly. Even if there is a late fix, a short-term extension, a redesign with offsets, eligibility tweaks and things, the impact is landing in 2026. Premium notices are going out. Constituents are noticing. Suddenly, this isn't abstract math anymore. Remember the lockdown, all that joy? Yeah. Well, the continuing resolution that ended it only really kicked the can down the road to January 30th. So we could get an early sequel if the Dems decide that they do want to pick up this fight again and make the subsidies the main battleground, and then probably wave the white flag again. But who knows? It's all the future.
That is one thing that they're good at doing, waving that white flag. This also fits what we saw in 2025. People don't just read the symbolic or provocative bills, they also read the ones that hit their wallets.
Yes, that's right. And the real world impact of soaring subsidies will really make people take notice.
Yes, the amount that I have been hearing my friends talk about their new premiums, I don't know how people are going to make it through. So, another unavoidable federal storyline, AI. Not just the tech, but who gets to control it.
People will remember Trump's executive order towards the back end of 2025, which signaled a push towards a national AI framework and a clear preference to slow or discourage state-level AI regulation. But that hasn't ended the debate at all. It's just relocated it.
Because historically, telling states to wait is the fastest way to guarantee that they don't.
Yes, exactly. So 2026 isn't the year of does Congress regulate AI? It's the year of who defines the rules first, agencies, courts, or states. And that fight bleeds into adjacent areas like energy, the grid, and infrastructure. It's going to be a huge, huge story this year.
Oh yeah, you absolutely can't scale AI without power. We've been kind of skirting around that for the last 2 years. And this year, states are going to be looking at this. It's been very obvious how some of this usage and data centers are impacting local communities. So even if states are told not to regulate AI directly, they're definitely going to have some regulatory systems around what keeps it running. We also have to talk about appropriations. We mentioned the January 30th deadlines, the ACA funding intersections, the shutdown brinksmanship, but there are also a lot of other must-pass spending bills that are quietly carrying policy riders and not really going anywhere.
Yes. And that's where a lot of 2026 fights will actually live. Not in splashy standalone bills, but buried deep in budget text. Culture wars by footnote. Congress will have to get real about passing these actual budget bills rather than continuing resolutions that dodge the real issues.
Yes, and once one Epstein-adjacent bill passes,
4 more appear immediately. Yes, Congress does love a franchise. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Epstein story rumbling on and Congress continuing to at least pay lip service to getting the files.
Let's zoom in to the states, because if 2025 taught us anything, it's that the attention clusters locally and government is local, people.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where AI and tech in general shows up differently. States aren't chasing sweeping frameworks. They're slicing the issue into politically saleable pieces.
Yes, and one of those big pieces is deepfakes in elections, disclosure rules, age gating, AI and hiring, AI and government procurement. I really do think that we'll also see a lot more movement on this next year, regulating tech and access for minors. This year has been an absolute mess with some pretty major disasters as it relates to kids online using tech that hasn't been regulated.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we'll see a lot of that this year, and we'll definitely see some of these narrow bills with very real consequences, often framed as consumer protection or child safety, but that give states more confidence to actually push forward in regulating this stuff more tightly. We've spoken before about like chatbots and things like that. I think that will be a real sort of touchstone this year.
Yes.
And probably something that we do need more of anyway.
Yes, I do agree. We need innovation, but also I think we've learned some lessons, and it's time to put some little tiny, at least, the gutter ball guiders in the bowling alley.
Absolutely.
All right, and then another huge item that's not going to be cooling off or being subtle at all this year is elections, the through line of essentially all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So as the midterms start to loom later in the year, expect bills on registration rules, voter ID, absentee and mail voting, framed as integrity or security, but always deeply political.
And underneath that, the kind of quieter stuff, the election administration, staffing, funding, records retention, infrastructure.
Yes, absolutely. The unsexy bills that actually determine whether elections function and how well they function.
And we do want functioning elections. One thing that I'm watching incredibly close this year is the cost of living policy. There's housing, insurance premiums, taxes, fees. Affordability is going to do a lot of work as a word. It's already putting in some work in the later end of 2025, especially the last month of 2025. I feel like I couldn't get away from the podcast policymakers and the current administration using the word affordability at every moment in the day.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that will only get bigger and bigger, particularly as the elections sort of get closer. I think the Republicans are very well aware that it was affordability effectively that cost Harris the election, and it could do the same for all sorts of Republican seats around the country. So yes, they will be hammering affordability and trying to play up all the great work that they're doing and how things are getting so much cheaper. But aren't they? But for me, insurance, I think, is the sleeper issue here that is very much related to affordability. Disaster-driven premium strikes are really pushing states towards uncomfortable territory. You've got reinsurance programs, mitigation incentives, even market intervention. This is obviously a variety of different states. You've got California, obviously, with their wildfires, but then Florida is also a state where insurance premiums are really sort of driving the cost of living as well. So I think we'll see a lot of action on that.
Which, again, fits the pattern of 2025. People read bills that affects their paycheck, their home, or their ability to stay insured and live in this country. And a few more trends that I'm watching. School choice fights are absolutely not going anywhere. We also have vaccine mandates, especially in education and employment. They just keep cycling back. Obviously, RFK Jr. is really driving that. But I also really think that there's going to be a bigger focal point, whether it's actually with legislation or just us talking about it a lot. But this AI-driven election manipulation is going to have to really force states to have faster action if we have any hope of fighting whatever is going to be happening with these midterms this year.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be huge just because AI just keeps getting better and better, almost week by week, really. So by the time we get to the elections later this year, who knows what AI will be able to do and what kind of influence it will have. It is a genuine worry, and I think legislators around the country will be responding to it. And all of this really does tie into the broader Project 2025 ecosystem, not as a unified bill list, but really as ideas that filter through into legislation, executive actions, and then regulations. The new-ish administration has already taken action on a shockingly large part of that Project 2025 document, but there's still a lot more for it to do.
Right, and even within that, there's this branding shift that we're seeing that's kind of helping a lot of this Project 2025 move forward in ways that are maybe a little bit more sneaky or softer language that are wrapping these policies. I think a lot about that silencer bill that we talked about earlier this year of framing legalizing silencers as hearing protection, and that was really strategic. And I just think we're going to be seeing a lot more of, wait, what does this bill actually do moments in the legislature this year?
This rebrand era of legislation is absolutely thriving, which of course is why you need a service like Build Track 50, where we'll break it down. AI will give you the absolute straight, honest answer about what the bill actually does.
Right. And one of the other things that Build Track 50 is so helpful with is tracking all of these executive orders and regulations, because we're seeing so much more done via regulation and not by policy passing, because Congress is just not wanting to bring things up for a vote.
Yes, absolutely. And it means that power moves faster and is much slicker, but that accountability gets much fuzzier.
And that is exactly what we don't need more of these days. We want accountability.
Absolutely do. Absolutely do.
And one of the things that we talk about year after year, but it's definitely continuing to be just a major, major sticking point, is healthcare and abortion policy. So this is obviously going to stay front and center this year. We've had a lot of stuff that happened in 2025 around it in the years since Roe was overturned. But we have coverage fights, access fights, court-triggered responses, and none of that is cooling off this year.
No, absolutely not. And one more federal pressure point: money and power inside government. Congressional stock trading, crypto exposure, enrichment rules. It's messy, visible, and increasingly hard to ignore. And my big prediction for the year actually is on sports betting. I think that the massive rise in legal gambling online and in all of these apps that are proliferating now is creating all sorts of social problems and addiction and so on. And I think we could see it explode quite publicly next year. And then you'll see legislatures really scrambling to catch up and try and regulate this in some way.
I really agree with that. One thing that I am very interested to see is how these congressional stock trading bills go. And we actually talked about this earlier this year. There's a lot more just kind of conversation in the zeitgeist about this. But I do think also we're not paying them enough money if we're not allowing them to trade stocks. So I think this is a larger reckoning of how do we ensure that people are being incentivized to vote for their constituents and not for their pocketbook. So we'll see.
I mean, I agree. I'm a big fan of actually paying politicians really good salaries, because then you get the best people and you disincentivize this kind of sort of low-level sort of profiteering and corruption and so on. Particularly if you really crack down. It's like it's Singapore, I think, where they pay their politicians $1 million a year, but then if they had the slightest whiff of any kind of impropriety, and they're gone. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Well, and impropriety is something I think we are extra predicting for this year, or drama that's not going anywhere. We started off 2025 with Minnesota's legislature basically imploding. I still can't believe that happened in general, and that was less than 365 days ago. But then you add in the Texas lawmakers literally fleeing their state and tuning in to live news podcasts, hiding in closets, over a redistricting battle, to ultimately have to come back and it passed and all these other things. But one thing is beyond clear. We are in the age of viral legislating.
Yes, absolutely. Policy still matters, of course, but performance and optics matter too, much more than they have in the past.
Right, which means 2026 won't be about what passes. It'll be about what people watch, clip, argue over, and ultimately, hopefully, organize around.
Yes, absolutely. Or maybe what the AI watches, clips, argues about and organize around. Who knows the way it's going? But it does seem that no matter how geriatric the representative, they're all looking for those viral moments. And you know what? That's exactly where we'll be, watching them all year, making those viral moments.
Yes, honestly, I'm hoping for at least a little bit more of the contraception begins at erection type legislation that was really thought-provoking and hilarious.
You heard it here first, folks. Then Sarah wants more erection-related legislation this year. Okay?
Well, on that note, thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow all of the legislation we'll be unpacking all year at BuildTrack50.com, and drop a comment on what you think is coming this year.
We'll see you next time, somewhere between the footnotes and the fallout of all these new 2026 sessions.